The message came without warning. It wasn't intercepted or translated. It was delivered. Simultaneously, across every major human network, screen, and frequency, a single voice filled the air. Deep, resonant, and utterly without emotion. I am Varulik, High Speaker of the Zorvani Dominion. Your world has been observed. Your systems catalogued. Your species measured. You have 30 days to surrender unconditionally or face complete planetary sterilization. No further warnings will be given. Then the transmission ended. There was no follow-up, no sign-off, no offer to negotiate, just silence. For a moment, the world held its breath. The Zorvani Dominion was not a mystery. Its name had spread like thunder across interstellar trade routes and deep space whispers. Dozens of species had fallen under its rule. Some enslaved, others erased. Those who resisted were crushed. Those who submitted were quietly folded into a machine that demanded loyalty and offered fear in return. The galaxy had long since learned not to defy them. But Earth was not like the rest. Instead of chaos, the planet responded with eerie calm. Government leaders from every nation locked into secure conference calls. Satellite defense networks quietly shifted alignment. Military satellites that had never before been activated began to hum. The International Space Force, often dismissed as symbolic, entered full combat readiness within hours. There were no panic broadcasts, no calls for surrender, no press conferences with desperate pleas for peace. The official response came 12 hours later. It was delivered via a tight beam laser aimed directly at the coordinates where the Zorvani transmission originated. The message was only 3 words long. We decline, respectfully. That was all. The world moved on. Factories began working overtime, but not to make consumer goods. Civilian satellites were reprogrammed. Old war bunkers that hadn't been touched since the 22nd century flickered to life with power. Atmospheric monitoring systems began scanning far beyond Earth's skies. The world's population, while tense, did not riot. In fact, something else began to spread, an understanding. A quiet awareness that humanity had already made its choice. And somewhere far from Earth, deep within the heart of the Dominion, a low-ranking analyst stared at Earth's reply and frowned. No groveling, no threats. Just calm defiance. The analyst flagged the message as unusual behavior pattern, high threat potential, then routed it up the chain. But the warning would be ignored. The Dominion had never faced a species like humanity. They didn't understand the long memory of a race that had known nothing but war, peace, and the bitter cost of both. They had no idea that Earth's quiet response was not hesitation, but certainty. The Zorvani had asked for war. And humanity, without hesitation, had already begun to answer. Earth did not react the way the Zorvani expected. The Dominion's analysts predicted widespread panic, political collapse, or at least a wave of public outcry demanding peace. But nothing like that happened. Instead, Earth became quieter, calmer, as if the entire planet had taken one deep breath and held it. In the hours following the transmission, national governments activated emergency protocols that had never been used. Encrypted networks lit up with high-level chatter. The United Global Council, once a symbolic forum of nations, transitioned into its wartime posture for the first time since its formation. In underground facilities, shielded from orbital scans, world leaders sat face to face, many of them for the first time without intermediaries or translators. Their decision was immediate and final. There would be no surrender. Within 24 hours, Earth's defense systems began moving in ways that weren't visible to the casual observer. Defense satellites shifted orbit to form an overlapping mesh around the planet. Subsurface silos, some hidden beneath mountains and others deep in the oceans, came online. The dormant orbital network called Project Iron Resolve, once dismissed as a costly failure, began transmitting again. Above the noise of normal life, humanity was shifting gears. But on the surface, life appeared unchanged. Cities remained lit. Flights continued. News outlets speculated cautiously, but avoided alarmism. People talked, yes, but not with fear. There was something deeper than panic growing now. Something sharper, focused. The world remembered. It remembered centuries of conflict, hard-won peace, and the generations who had dreamed of the stars only to find the shadows waiting. Humanity had not reached space through unity or optimism alone. It had clawed its way forward through struggle and setbacks. It had survived its own worst instincts. And now, faced with a threat that had no interest in reason, Earth found something old and familiar stirring in its bones. Across military academies, recruits trained in silence, not knowing when they'd be deployed. Engineers worked in sealed labs, reviving old prototypes once considered too dangerous or ambitious to pursue. Artificial intelligences that had been carefully restricted were now given temporary combat clearance. Global production lines quietly shifted from luxury goods to weapons platforms. Not because Earth loved war, but because Earth understood it. In the dark corridors of the Dominion's vast intelligence stations, their surveillance teams began to notice something strange. Earth's communication traffic had dropped by nearly 30%. Civilian chatter went dark. Civil networks had been rerouted or shut down entirely. The planet wasn't shutting down. It was closing ranks. A senior Zorvani officer glanced over the reports and scoffed. "Primitive fear," he said, dismissing it. "They'll beg for peace soon." But far below Earth's surface, in bunkers powered by fusion reactors and guarded by AI-controlled drones, humanity wasn't afraid. It was preparing. And soon, the stars would know the difference. The Zorvani fleet arrived 10 days ahead of schedule. There was no ceremony, no formal declaration. Dozens of warships emerged from slit space like blades sliding through silk, forming a wall of obsidian hulls above Earth's orbit. Each vessel was coated in mirror-black armor and pulsed with violet energy signatures. They didn't attempt to contact Earth. They were here for one purpose: compliance or destruction. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Admiral Kreksov, commander of the Dominion's expeditionary fleet, reviewed the planet's thermal and electromagnetic readings. Everything was within expected ranges. No defensive posturing. No shield grids. No mobilized fleet. It looked, to his eyes, like surrender. He allowed himself a satisfied grin. "Begin orbital positioning," he ordered. "Prepare to deliver final notice." But they never got the chance. Just as the lead destroyer moved into low orbit, something flashed near Mars. A spike of light. Unregistered. Unexpected. Within milliseconds, the Zorvani destroyer twisted violently, hull imploding as if it had been struck by an invisible hammer. Then, a second flash from lunar orbit. Then another. In the span of 10 seconds, 3 Dominion ships were gone. Not damaged, erased. Admiral Kreksov stood frozen. "What is this?" he barked. "Unknown weapons fire. Admiral, no energy signature. No lock-on detected. They're using mass-based kinetic strikes. High speed, untraceable trajectories. We're blind to their targeting systems." Earth had not fired a warning shot. It had opened the fight with precision. The sky above the planet lit up. From deep within Earth's atmosphere, hundreds of micro-launches occurred simultaneously. Kinetic kill vehicles, small, silent, and traveling at hypersonic speeds, pierced space like needles. The Zorvani's shielding systems, tuned for energy weapons and plasma bombardment, were useless. Humanity had chosen raw force. The Dominion tried to respond. They activated countermeasures, scrambled fighter drones, and launched retaliatory strikes at the surface. But every missile they'd fired was intercepted mid-flight. Every scout ship that moved to investigate vanished from sensors. The Zorvani fleet wasn't fighting back. It was being dissected. On Earth, command centers remained calm. Orders were executed by AI nodes linked to every defense system. Human operators monitored conditions, but they didn't need to interfere. Years of planning had turned Earth into a fortress disguised as a planet. In 1 hour, the Dominion lost 8 ships. Admiral Kreksov, now pale and silent, watched as his tactical board dissolved into red. He realized something horrifying. Humanity hadn't just prepared for a battle, it had expected this exact encounter. It had planned every second. Every weakness in Zorvani doctrine had been studied, simulated, and accounted for. This was never a defensive world, he muttered. It's a trap. And high above Earth, as debris fields grew and silence fell over the comms, humanity's first answer to war echoed across the void. Not with words, but with overwhelming, unstoppable action. The Dominion's confidence crumbled with every passing minute. What had begun as a show of power had turned into a catastrophic ambush. Zorvani cruisers, equipped with some of the most advanced energy shielding in the known galaxy, were being ripped apart by physical projectiles. They had no answers, no countermeasures. These weren't just weapons. They were tactics from an entirely different mindset. The Zorvani had expected a civilized response. Instead, they were fighting ghosts and gravity. Admiral Kreksov demanded answers. Where are their ships? Their fleet? Why are we only seeing orbital strikes? His officers had no explanation. No human vessels had yet been detected in space. There were no emissions, no launch signatures, nothing that matched any standard fleet engagement. And yet the Dominion was losing ships, one by one, with mechanical precision. Then something new happened. A series of massive thermal spikes erupted from the oceans. For a moment, the Zorvani systems thought it was a natural seismic event. But then dozens of structures rose from the deep, submerged platforms, hidden under layers of sonar camouflage and artificial terrain. From them launched sleek, triangular craft, unmanned fighters equipped with adaptive camouflage, and silent plasma drives. They shimmered like distortions in space, and when they accelerated, they moved without visible flame. Kreksov stared in disbelief. They built launch platforms in their oceans, he said, voice low. Another officer pointed toward Earth's polar regions. We're detecting high-altitude platforms, some disguised as weather stations. They're launching kinetic clusters into orbit. The upper atmosphere is full of them. The Dominion had misjudged Earth. They had assumed humanity's technology was primitive, based on dated scans and intercepted broadcasts. What they hadn't realized was that humanity had hidden its real capabilities beneath layers of civilian infrastructure and harmless appearances. Civilian satellites doubled as laser relays. Abandoned space stations were actually weapons platforms, and the small fleet humanity had shown in open space. It wasn't the real fleet, because the real fleet was already among them. Dozens of Zorvani ships began malfunctioning simultaneously. Systems froze. Engines stalled. Targeting arrays blinked out. Hidden aboard their own vessels were nanite swarms, inserted through probe interceptions weeks earlier. These were no mere bugs. They were saboteurs, human-built, adaptive, and smart. Back on Earth, inside a buried command complex in Antarctica, General Elia Monroe watched the battle unfold with measured calm. The AI systems under her control executed orders faster than any organic mind could follow. Every piece of Earth's defense web had been built not for display, but for this moment. They never saw it coming, she said quietly. Across the fleet, Zorvani officers scrambled, desperate to regain control. But the damage was done. The Dominion had come expecting fear, chaos, and confusion. Instead, they have found clarity, unity, and weapons crafted with quiet, unshakable resolve. Humanity had not waited for the war to come. It had prepared for it, in secret and in silence. And now, every hidden piece was in motion. The Zorvani Dominion had come to Earth to wage war. They never imagined Earth would bring the war to them first. While the remnants of the expeditionary fleet scrambled for retreat or regrouping, humanity's real counterattack was already underway. It didn't begin with fleets rising from planetary docks or ships launching from orbital yards. It began in the empty dark, deep space far beyond Earth's orbit. What the Dominion hadn't seen What their long-range probes had never detected were the disguised mining vessels stationed across the outer solar system. For years, humanity had quietly deployed dozens of long-range ships masked as resource harvesters. Their cores weren't filled with ore or minerals. They were bristling with weapons and jump drives. Now, those ships moved. They didn't light up the stars. They didn't fire massive salvos. They simply jumped directly into Dominion-held space. The first strike came at Vasari Station, a key supply hub for the Zorvani fleet. It was a logistical node, never designed to repel an attack. 3 of Earth's stealth ships arrived, activated close-range mass drivers, and tore through the station's core before any alarms could even register. Within minutes, the station went dark. 17 hours later, the same happened to a communication relay orbiting Rathos Prime, then a drone manufacturing facility near the Fexari Belt. Silent, precise, coordinated. Earth was not retaliating out of rage. It was executing a playbook it had written in secret. On Dominion homeworlds, reports flooded in. Entire bases cut off. High-speed data links severed. Vital outposts obliterated without warning. There was no pattern to the strikes, and yet each hit caused maximum disruption. For the first time in generations, the Dominion felt real panic. Admiral Kreksov, humiliated and defeated, was recalled and dishonored. But even as new commanders stepped forward, they found themselves powerless to stop what was happening. Their fleets had never trained for asymmetric warfare. They didn't know how to fight an enemy that didn't stand still. Humanity wasn't playing by the rules. Because humanity had learned through centuries of war that survival came not through power alone, but through adaptability, speed, and ruthlessness. In underground strategy rooms across Earth, commanders and AI analysts pored over every Dominion response. They adapted with terrifying efficiency. Every time the Dominion shifted formations, humanity struck elsewhere. Every time defenses were repositioned, another node fell. The galaxy had watched the Zorvani crush empires for centuries. Now, they were watching those same empires rise in flames. Across the stars, whispers began. In bars, in hidden meetings, in encrypted forums, people asked the same thing. If Earth could fight them, why couldn't we? Humanity wasn't just fighting back. It was showing others how. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The Zorvani Dominion had ruled for over 300 years. Their dominance was absolute, their authority unquestioned. Entire species had bowed without resistance, crushed before they could dream of rebellion. But then came Earth, small, isolated, unimpressive on paper. And yet now, Zorvani command centers across dozens of systems were lit with red alerts, emergency protocols, and questions no one dared to answer. Because humanity wasn't just resisting. It was winning. News traveled faster than light when carried by fear. By the third week of Earth's counterattack, reports of Zorvani defeats reached the edges of their empire. Slave worlds began to whisper. Merchant factions, once loyal under threat of annihilation, went silent. The Dominion's grip wasn't just slipping, it was cracking. And humanity saw it. In Earth's central war room, buried beneath the Andes Mountains, General Monroe stood before a rotating display of Dominion-controlled systems. Lines of red blinked with every confirmed strike. But more importantly, green pulses had begun to appear. Signals from worlds that had previously been silent. Encrypted messages, coded symbols, ancient languages long outlawed. Other civilizations were watching, and they were beginning to respond. A message came from the Dravari, a species long thought extinct after refusing Dominion assimilation. It was short, just 2 words, still here. Then from the Lissari cluster, a beacon activated that hadn't pulsed in over a century. No words, just an ancient resistance symbol the Dominion had once erased from history. Then, something greater. A fleet appeared near the Veil Nebula. Not human, not Zorvani. It was a coalition of fringe worlds, outcasts, smugglers, and pirates, flying under one banner. the right to exist free of fear. They didn't ask for permission. They just started attacking supply lines. The Dominion responded with brute force. Entire battalions were deployed. Crack fleets were sent to crush what they called the Earth-inspired chaos. But Earth wasn't done yet. Another wave of stealth ships jumped behind enemy lines. This time, they didn't just target infrastructure. They delivered encrypted weapon schematics, strategic data, and resistance instructions to hidden rebel cells across the Dominion's far reaches. Earth had no interest in ruling. It wanted others to rise. Inside Dominion High Command, panic was now official. Meetings once filled with arrogance were now ruled by shouting and blame. Protocols meant for planetary extermination were discussed openly. But Earth had made that dangerous. Their first attack had proven one truth. Retaliation would be answered tenfold. In the shadows of crumbling Zorveni order, species once bent beneath the boot of empire looked to the stars and saw a different light. Not a savior. A spark. Humanity hadn't declared itself the ruler of the stars. It had simply reminded the galaxy what freedom looked like. And now fire was catching. The Zorvani Dominion was losing. Not just ships or territory. Control. The kind of control that kept trillions obedient, kept planets silent, kept history frozen in fear. That control had shattered, not with a grand speech or a galaxy-spanning fleet, but with precision strikes and a human refusal to kneel. The Dominion, humiliated and cornered, did what all frightened empires do. It lashed out. They called it Operation Silence, a full-scale retaliation, a message wrapped in blood. 10 fleets, 1,000 ships, one objective, Earth. No more diplomacy, no more probing. They would reduce humanity's homeworld to glass, not just as punishment, but as a warning to every species watching, to every rebel cell that dared whisper hope. Earth would be erased, and the memory of resistance would die with it. The fleets launched with full ceremony. Zorveni war hymns blared across comms. Propaganda broadcasts flooded Dominion-controlled systems, promising the extinction of the Defiant. But deep in their command structure, cracks had already formed. Some Zorvani officers questioned the plan. They spoke in private about the risk, about the fact that Earth had been prepared, too prepared. They were right to worry, because Earth was not idle. From the icy dark beyond Pluto, humanity watched the fleet move, every hyperspace ripple, every fuel signature. They knew the Dominion's path before the Dominion did, and waiting in that void was humanity's final card, a fleet no one had seen before, a fleet built in silence. They called it the Veil Armada. Hundreds of vessels, each one born in secrecy, designed with stealth plating, silent reactors, and railgun arrays capable of punching through mountains. Some of the ships weren't even piloted by humans. They were operated by war ADAs forged in simulated battles, trained in millions of scenarios. The Zorveni thought they were bringing destruction. They were heading into a trap. The ambush unfolded at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. The first Dominion fleet was hit before it could even activate shields. Entire capital ships split in half by kinetic spears moving faster than thought. No warning, no transmissions, just death. The second wave panicked. It broke formation and attempted retreat. Humanity let them run, because the message was already sent. This wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. On Earth, cities held their breath. The sky remained clear, the ground unmoved. The people knew the war wasn't over, but they knew something more important now. They were not powerless. They were not alone. And they were not afraid. Across Dominion space, riots erupted. Garrisons were overrun. Governors defected. In some systems, Zorveni troops laid down arms, unwilling to fight a war they no longer believed in. The illusion of invincibility was gone. Humanity had not just wounded the beast, it had unmasked it. And soon, all that would be left was the fall. The Zorvani Dominion didn't fall in a blaze of glory. It fell in silence, It fell when a dozen of its core worlds declared independence in a single day. It fell when food convoys vanished into rebel space and never returned. It fell when its citizens stopped fearing its wrath. Not because they no longer believed the Dominion could kill them, but because they believed in something stronger. That freedom was worth the risk. The final blow came not from Earth's weapons, but from its voice. Humanity broadcast one final message into every known language, across every channel the Dominion once controlled. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. You do not need to serve to survive. You do not need to kneel to live. We fought not because we wanted war, but because we were asked to die quietly. And we refused. The galaxy listened. And then it roared. Entire systems overthrew their Zorvani overseers. Former slaves became leaders. Old enemies forged new alliances. Pirate fleets turned into protectors. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy was not a map of borders, but a storm of voices reclaiming their own stories. The Dominion, unable to adapt, fractured. Its leaders turned on each other. Fleets once feared across the stars now drifted without orders. Some were captured, others were abandoned, and some simply vanished, fleeing into the black with no banner left to follow. On Earth, there was no celebration parade, no triumphant banners or speeches. Humanity didn't claim conquest, because this was never about conquest. In the command center buried deep beneath the Andes, General Elia Monroe stood before a screen showing hundreds of independent systems flickering to life. Green for free, orange for rising, red for fallen. So much damage, she murmured. But maybe, now we can rebuild. Around her, diplomats coordinated with alien leaders who had once been strangers. Engineers shared schematics for clean energy systems. Soldiers were reassigned as peacekeepers. Even the AI war corps were decommissioned, not out of fear, but choice. Humanity had proven it could fight. Now it would prove it could stop. Across the stars, a new network formed. Loose, voluntary. Not an empire, not a dominion. Something else entirely. A shared defense, built not on domination, but cooperation. A new galactic code. And humanity, once underestimated and ignored, stood at its center, not as rulers, but as equals. Because they had been asked for war. And they had answered, instantly, brutally, without hesitation. But when the dust cleared, and the stars were quiet again, they had chosen something rarer. Peace. Earned, not given. And in that choice, they changed the galaxy forever.